In this video, we're going to be looking at negative externalities. I'm going to be assuming that you've seen my introduction to negative externalities video, and we're going to be covering on this one, the nasty diagram. So let's start with some definitions. Quick reminder. The private cost is the cost to the individual economic unit of their decision to consume or produce. So for example, if you buy a Mars bar, the private cost is going to be, say, 50p. If a firm decides to produce a Mars bar, their marginal cost is probably going to be about 20p. The external cost is the negative impact to other people, third parties involved in that decision. The social cost, in other words, the economic cost, is the private cost plus the external cost. So some examples of things that typically come up on questions: airports, obvious ones, air pollution, noise pollution, and local traffic congestion. With factories, obviously it would depend upon the type of factory, but you've got the three that we've already mentioned for airports, plus we've got the possibility of water pollution. Again, a good example there would be the picture on the left hand side of where you've got discharge from a pulp mill. If we look at the fishing industry, the problem typically is overfishing, where more fish are being killed than are breeding, which therefore means that future economic units are going to miss out because they won't have the quantity or quality of fish that we have at the moment. A slightly way out one, say a sixth form college. Normally when we think of education, we think of external benefits, but of course if you've got a college, you're going to have noise, you're going to have litter in the area around the college. So the diagram, well, we start off with a straightforward demand and supply curve. There's just a couple of very small changes. We've called the supply curve the same as the marginal private cost curve. We've called the demand curve the marginal private benefit curve, which, given that we are looking at external costs, we're assuming that there are no external costs or benefits through consumption. So that is exactly the same as the marginal social benefit curve. So the free market will be producing a quantity of QF units. If we're thinking about external costs, then obviously the costs to society are going to be more than the costs to the individual, and you can see there that the vertical difference between those two lines is the external cost. So as far as society is concerned, we ought to be producing QS units, but we're not. We're producing QF units, so we are overproducing. There are too many goods being produced than society would want. Now the actual cost to society, if we look at that yellow line there, so these are units which we are producing, which society would rather that we were not producing. Well, the benefit that people are receiving from that unit is going to be taken from the demand curve, but the cost to society is taken from the marginal social cost curve. So that gap is a welfare loss. In total, society is worse off. And if we add up all of those welfare losses, we get a welfare loss triangle. Economists love triangles for welfare losses. So this is the finished diagram that brings all of those things together. It's easily worth 4 marks in any exam paper, and of course if you expand upon those points, then you're going to get additional marks, or if you challenge those points, then you're going to be into the realm of evaluation. Now if you want to, you can skip forward a few minutes, because I'm going to be talking about the external costs in consumption. You do have to learn the production diagram. You don't have to learn the consumption diagram. It might be worth your while sticking with it, however, as I'm coming up with a number of examples that frequently come up on questions. For example, cigarette consumption, and it might be quite nice if you could discuss some of those things in your answer. So first example here, cigarettes. So you can see there the externality. You've got smelly air, you've got passive smoking, you've got that child being affected by passive smoking. More to the point, you've got those fetuses being affected by passive smoking. You see the difference between the fetus for the smoking mother and the non-smoking mother, and of course dealing with the health costs of smoking will put a burden on taxpayers. With alcohol, you've got the negative externalities of mood swings, for example, fighting. You've got vomit, throwing up, and you stepping in it, or alternatively, somebody having to be paid to clear up their vomit. You've got the health spending with alcohol-related diseases, and of course, you've got noise pollution from when they decide to have a good old sing-song right outside your house. Third one, petrol. Now that could be an external cost in consumption, but it could also be an external cost in production. For example, if Tesco are delivering goods to your house. So there we have CO2 emissions, we have air pollution, we have the impact on health, dizziness, skin irritation, headaches, breathing difficulties, and of course we also have noise pollution from petrol consumption. And with fireworks, we have the obvious impact on noise pollution. Now, note I've got a picture of a dog. The fact that that dog is scared is not itself an externality, because a dog is not an economic agent, but its owner is an economic agent. And so if they are negatively affected by the dog being upset, then that is an external cost of that fireworks show. Simplified diagram for this because it's not on the spec. Obviously, if others are being negatively affected by you consuming something, then the benefit to society is less than the benefit to the individual. So we've got a left shift of the marginal social benefit curve. You'll notice on this one, we're assuming that there are no external costs in production. So we finish up with the free market producing QF, but society would only like us to produce QS units. So we've still got overproduction. So what about those however points, the evaluative points? Well, first of all, actually measuring the quantitative impact of a negative externality is often really difficult. How much noise pollution is there, say, from an airport? Where I live, there are aircraft flying over, but is that caused by Heathrow Airport or Stansted Airport? How big a problem is it? Well, again, actually measuring it is really, really, really difficult. Now remember, we don't just have to measure the quantitative impact. In order for us to show it on a diagram, we need to price it up. So how much is, say, the loss of a couple of hours sleep because we live close to an airport worth? Or alternatively, a couple of hours sleep due to that baby waking up to the firework display? Or the cost of that dog being upset by the firework display? We're not probably talking about money there. We're probably talking about an opportunity cost, maybe the fact that that person could be doing something like watching telly rather than dealing with a frightened dog. Very, very, very difficult to put a sum of money on, if not impossible. Now, as soon as you can think of an external benefit to counter the external cost, you're going to be racking up the evaluation marks. So that firework display that is causing the dog to go loopy and causing the baby to wake up is also giving pleasure to people who didn't actually pay for the fireworks. Similarly, that airport that's causing the air pollution and the noise pollution and the traffic congestion is also bringing tourist income into the country. And finally, you're probably going to be writing about some government solution to the problem. Well, the problem with governments is sometimes they actually either act too little or too late. They do too little, or sometimes they engage in overkill. So if you can think of a negative impact of government action, then again you're going to be getting evaluation marks. So I'd personally leave that until last. I'd go for the external benefits, or the obvious point that measuring the quantitative impact in terms of money is really difficult.